Hello, future UA students. My name is Ruth Ann Carter, and I'm here today to give you the inside scoop about why your first class pick needs to be the history of Western civilizations through walking you through one of my all-time favorite lessons. I wanted to start off by brushing over the question that seems to be asked when anyone is debating taking a history class. Why study history? Lucky for you, in this class, your question will be answered, but I wanted to give a quick answer before I move on. First off, the past is a part of human experience. Yes, we live in the present, but our memories live in the past, and the study of history allows us to piece together fragments of human existence to understand what our world was like before us. History studies human experience and cause and effect, all leading us to understand the concept of change. Studying history allows us to study cycles of change and grasp that change is rough and problematic, but it is an inevitable part of the human experience. Now, to get into the meat of why this class caught my eye and why it should catch yours, I want to walk you through the mythologies of ancient Greece. The Greeks lived around the years 2000 to 479 BCE and thrived as one of the more elite empires of their time. Though, the most interesting aspect of their history, in my opinion, is their religious activity. Their religion consisted of hundreds of stories revolving around the Olympian deities who lived on Mount Olympus. Their religion was a compilation of stories known as myths, which is why we call it mythology. The Greek gods had extremely different stories than many of the deities in modern religions. They were chaotic, vain, passionate, and even brutal. All of their stories tied in together, and they all revolved around the fact that the world begins in chaos and ends in tragedy. The gods and goddesses were not necessarily regularly worshipped, but they were woven into the everyday lives of the ancient Greeks. For example, before a marriage, the brides visited and gave offerings and prayers to the virgin goddess Artemis. Religion was also not based on ritual and did not have an ethical code that people were expected to abide by. A large part of worship in ancient Greece actually depended on location. Ancient Greece was divided into different city-states, also known as a polis, and each polis had different gods and goddesses associated with them. Each polis held different religious festivals depending on their deity. For example, in Athens, the significant festivals were Panathenea, honoring the goddess Athena, and the Great Dionysia, honoring Dionysius, most famous for being the god of wine. Similar to many modern religions, the Greeks did have priests and priestesses that communicated more directly to the gods and helped during offerings or worships. The relationship between humans and deities was often fairly complex. There was no emotional tie between humans and the deities. It was more contractual. For example, for good crops and harvests, they would pray to Demeter and offer sacrifices and offerings. The only emotion the gods would typically show is wrath. The gods and goddesses also played favorites amongst the humans, such as Hera to the pregnant woman. The only exception to this was their relationship to Dionysius. People used their prayer to him for spiritual and passionate purposes, and his stories also contributed immensely to the tragedies in theater. Many historians and philosophers refer to this as the Dionysian cult. In regards to the human morality, the Greeks believed that every human's future was fixed. According to the Greeks, we are able to alter what the world does to us, but we can change how we respond to our given fates. To top off my beginner's guide to Greek mythology, let's talk a little bit about the afterlife. There was not a known universal belief about where the souls went in the afterlife, but most Greeks believed in the god Hades, the god of the underworld. I know that Greek mythology is extremely complicated and confusing, especially because all of the different stories and deities. But I hope diving into one of the lessons from this history course can encourage you to want to learn even more. And if you fall in love with learning about Greek mythology, let me just tell you, you're in luck. After this class, I realized that so many historical elements are tied together because societies and civilizations can have extreme impacts on each other. Let's take a look at the religion from ancient Egypt. Though Egyptian religion is just as interesting as that of ancient Greece, I want to save you some information for when you actually take this class, so I'll just keep this part brief. Egyptian religion is also a mix of myths and traditions. even though they have a large focus on the worship of their kings. Similar to ancient Greek mythology, Egyptians had local gods and goddesses, and in different regions. There were statues that were thought to be the legitimate god or goddess, though the most prominent deities they had were Osiris and Isis. Their love for each other was thought to set the entire cosmology in motion, but I will leave the rest of their story for you to learn next year. This is just a small snippet of what we talked about in our course. We covered everything from the Islamic religion to the Black Death. We also learned how to study history like a historian. I want you to close this video with a whole lot of questions. What were some more stories about the gods? What was the daily life like to the ancient Greeks? What more can we learn from this course? Because that is the job of a historian. And this class takes you one step closer down that path. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I really hope that the history of Western civilizations is the first on your list.